and I'll say this carefully because I'm sure there's the HR folks in the audience are going to go, "Oh, how could he say that?" HR needs to learn marketing. And I say that very truly.
Welcome to the HR Huddle podcast, presented by Sapient Insights Group, the ultimate resource for all things HR. It's time to get in the huddle.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the HR Huddle. I'm your host, Teri Zipper, CEO and Managing Partner at Sapient Insights Group. And we're back for another exciting episode of HR We Have a Problem. This is the show where we break down the big and most relevant HR issues of the day. We help you make sense of what they mean for you, and we talk about what you might do about some of them. Joining me today is Nov Omana. Nov is the CEO and founder of Collective HR Solutions and the founder of the Technology Review Council. Welcome, Nov. Always great to catch up with you.
Thank you, Teri. I very much appreciated to be here today.
So Nov and I first met, I want to say HR Tech maybe 2018, right?
Yeah.
I just remember thinking I could learn a thing or two from this guy. And you invited me to join your Technology Review Council. I had no idea what it was about, but it sounded really interesting and important, so I couldn't say no. And I've not been able to participate nearly as much as I'd like to, but I'd love to talk about it on the show today. I want to get perspective of what all you do, the importance of it, the importance of being in the market for technology, even when you're not really in the market. I think that's just a critical component of kind of knowing what's out there and what's available. So that's kind of what I wanted to talk about today. Does that sound like a good plan to you?
It would be thrilling to speak to it because I see it on the other side, participating in it, but not talking about what I do. So this is
Awesome.
a good opportunity. Appreciate it.
Well, then let's get into our huddle.
All righty, great. Get in. So quite literally, this started at roughly about 3.5, almost 4 years ago. It came out of my deep love of the technology in the HR space. I've been in that HR tech space my whole career. I may have been the very first HRIS, I'm not sure exactly, but the gray hair kind of speaks to that. But the idea of having seen so many different vendors and being approached by a couple of newer vendors, it struck me that they need a forum to let people know they exist, and especially in the startup. And so I reached out to my network, personal network, and then I moved out to my LinkedIn network, and we now have almost 700 people in this Technology Review Council. And the premise of the council is really to provide a vendor an audience to simply say, I want to do this. It's not so much a demonstration as opposed to really saying, I know you have a problem. I'm solving this piece of that problem. And that's really what I tell the vendors. You're here to tell us what you're solving, not demonstrate a product. And the audience is really interested, and that's the common theme amongst this Technology Review Council, is we're interested in what's new. And so they attend an hour-long presentation, a demonstration and explanation, and we ask a lot of questions from everything from how does this fit into my world, or why do you think this is a problem, or you're showing me some new technology, how is that founded in some logic of some sort? Is it AI being everybody's skeptical one way or another, either I love it or I don't like it. And we get a lot of questions about how do you validate this technology and how does it fit in my world? So that's really the audience is giving some feedback in the course of this conversation. The vendor, which to a T, every vendor says, I can't thank you enough for bringing me to the table. I got terrific information from prospective clients on the value of what I'm trying to provide. And I do not make any distinctions about the solution itself, in the sense that we've seen everything from a pre-boarding, onboarding, sourcing situation all the way out to a termination program, offboarding, if you will. So
Right.
we really run the gamut. And most of these are brand new startups for the most part. And so I literally do not charge for that purpose because they help me understand what's new. They're entertaining an audience and they're getting exposure. And I think that is a win-win-win situation all the way around. So
Yeah.
I don't discern people saying, okay, you don't have the budget, don't come. I want to see everything. And therefore, many of these startups really are very, very underfunded, if you will. So,
Yeah.
so
So
that's
your
kind of the
goal is
history.
kind of
Yeah.
twofold, right?
Yeah.
It's helping these startups, these vendors that may not be able to get in front of this many people at
Exactly.
one time. It's helping them get more visibility. And at the same time, it's helping people in the market, in the community, sort of learn about these new companies and look for opportunities or ways that they might fit into the broader landscape of HR technology.
Exactly. And I think to your point, the audience is seeking a little bit more insights on what is out there. You can go to a number of places. You could do a Google search for recruiting programs. When you get to about the 4,000th page and figuring out where do I start to sort that out, the intention is to really give them an understanding of the kind of general technologies that are available. There's kind of a point solution perspective of how to solve problems. And that what I'm getting out of that process from the audience itself is they're saying, this is pretty interesting. I would not have found these people had I not sit in this meeting. We do record all the meetings that are out there on my YouTube channel as well. So the perspective is sharing as much information out there, call it a semi-marketing or pseudo-marketing for the vendors, but it really is to provide a knowledge base for people to become acquainted. A lot of the HR folks still are not as aware of technology as they probably could and should be, and this is just another opportunity.
Yeah. How do you pick who you bring to the table? Do they pick you? Do they call and say, hey, no, I heard about this technology review council. I'd like to be part of it. Or are you
I wish it were
scouring
that
the
simple.
market or both?
Well, I will say I do make myself presence known at things like HR Tech Conference and so on, simply just going to visit all the vendors
Mm-hmm.
and so on. But if you will, the Technology Review Council members are also my eyes and ears out there. So if they're proposed by a vendor and they get a call and say, hey, I've got a new product I'd like to show you, I usually get an email or a quick call and they say, hey, no, I just ran into a vendor. I don't remember seeing them in technology. Would you like to talk to them? I do vet the vendor for lots of reasons. I personally want to be a little more conversant when I do talk to them or bring them to the table so we can have a dialogue rather than just a presentation. And so I'll do a little bit of vetting and spend some time with them to understand. I have to say, one of the funny offshoots of this whole thing is what people call their product.
Oh, yeah.
The strangest name I'm going, I will tell you in HR, it doesn't really work well in our world, but we would never have found you and things like that. So, but it's interesting to hear the stories behind what things became, and the naming and so on.
They are interesting. I've been on the front end of that a few times in
Exactly.
my career. I remember when I was at Mercer, we built this tool to manage the survey data, and we called it WIN, the Workforce Intelligence Network. And it was just, it sounded cool. It was an acronym.
Yeah.
You just come up with things that you like and try to run with them. But later on, when you're wanting people to find you, you're like, nobody's going to know what this is.
Exactly. And so I always ask that question amongst the many questions I have, but it starts with, why did you name this? And some of it works and some of it doesn't.
Yeah.
What we have seen over the many years that we've done this now is that quite literally people come and go. And so the world of startups is something that I'm fascinated with it. I don't think I'd ever want to participate in it. It's too difficult. But we are seeing a lot of the technology shows now starting to provide forums for the startups to do their pitches and so on for either investors or clients and so on.
Yeah, I really like the startup pavilion at HR Tech that they've started to have the last few years. And then the Pitch Fest obviously has always been popular.
Exactly.
And I'm sure a lot of other, shows are doing similar type things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, speaking to your system survey as well, just to give credit to the Sapient Insights survey, which I have been very, very enamored with since it started. And that's, again, the gray hair says a lot right there. But literally what you are seeing, I think, parallels what I'm seeing in the sense that point solutions are becoming a very popular way of augmenting what a base system provides. So many of the vendors today would like to have a lot of these functions, but they just can't develop them fast enough, or the market maybe is not really screaming for that.
Yeah.
But startups are really starting to fill some interesting gaps, and their approaches we're seeing, I think, are very refreshing. that they're not looking at the traditional problem and trying to just solve it with technology. They're actually changing the approach and how they're solving a problem. And
Yeah.
so we're seeing recruiting changing quite a bit, performance is changing. I love the world of benefits and learning. Those are the two, and I think your survey brought out that those are two very key areas that are growing quickly.
Yeah. And I think best of breed used to be a little more challenging. Obviously, integration and all of those things made it harder to kind of have all these multiple point solutions. But today, with all the integration and API and, just the capabilities that most of these vendors have with connecting to other tools and technologies, it makes having this concept of point solutions a lot simpler than it used to be.
Exactly. In fact, when I first did the technology review council, most of the vendors were seeking vendors, the larger vendors to hook up with. I'm seeing that reversing, that the larger vendors are now looking to the startups and going, what kind of functionality do I need to deliver to my customers in general? How am I going to find them? So that's the whole dynamics of that process has changed because the integrations are getting a little easier.
Yeah.
Most of the new vendors are already well adopted in terms of kind of plugging into the existing systems.
Yeah.
It's an interesting world to be sitting in there, and I never thought HR tech or HR in general was going to be this exciting. So
yeah, or this big. Like
yeah.
every year when I go to the conference, the exhibit hall gets bigger and bigger. It's it's like, and that's not even a drop in the bucket compared to how many vendors are actually out there doing stuff around HR and HR technology.
Yeah, I find that, we are seeing a tremendous kind of ebb and flow a little bit in terms of functionality. So recruiting was hot, learning is becoming hotter, benefits is really growing quite literally. And maybe we can speak a little bit to what we're seeing in terms of some of those trends. It really does support what your survey showed in terms of those growth areas as well, which is kind of nice. But what I am seeing is, and a couple of folks are now entering to this environment called a partner ecosystem. So that is becoming a very interesting part of my business in terms of evaluations and so on, is where I'm really trying to orient my clients to think about what they're trying to accomplish and forget about the technology or the system that would serve that. Because in all honesty, we now have a better variety of things we can go for. And many of the partners are sort of the larger companies, the vendors are starting to look at a partnership ecosystem that says, I have a performance management system, but if you want it to do this way, I have a couple of partners that are hooked into my system. And really, I think the major vendors are recognizing that a client would like to have one contract and one point of contact. I hate that term, one throat to choke, because I call it,
I'm not a fan either.
I would rather say it's one hand to shake. We'll just keep it that way. But quite literally, the idea is the major vendors will have that partner ecosystem and validate the fact that systems do interact well. The maintenance on that whole process is going to happen. From a client standpoint, that is very beneficial to see. So I think the partner ecosystem is going to grow, and it's going to open up the doors, I think, to these startups even more so than it does today.
Yeah, I think that's a great place for the big vendors to be thinking about the additional value they're bringing to the customer, right? They know about all the basics. Everybody does that. Everybody's got this or that feature. What are the value adds that you're bringing me? And how can that be used to change the dynamic? Like have you really looked at what I need and how you can solve for it with not just your system, but plugging me into your ecosystem?
Exactly. And I think it's going to be, it certainly has become part of my evaluation considerations, is talking about what kind of a partner system do you have? We certainly in our RFIs ask the vendor, if you aren't doing it yourself out of the box, is it a configuration of your system or is it delivered by a partner? So are they truly a partner in the sense that they're joined together?
Yeah.
And so it changes the whole dynamics of what we're looking at. And that's kind of what I'm hoping the Technology Review Council is doing for our audience, is to say, I really like the way they've approached this. Where are you hooked up? And here's my tech stack today. Will you fit in there? And so we're changing the landscape a little bit as we're doing this, which is
have there been any big aha moments for you? I know, I do my best to attend when I get, especially when I get an email from you that says, hey, something really great this past week, follow up. We made a video, like you want to check this out. Like I go and look at those, but
Yeah.
have there been any sort of big ahas for you and maybe this year or?
I would say yes. Actually, I'm glad you asked that question because what I am seeing, and I really believe that in terms of terminology, we keep changing the name of HR from personnel to whatever we want to call it, and we're now into the people ops and so on. But learning as we used to know it has become much more of a content management system. And I say that because what I'm seeing in terms of the learning platforms and newer vendors are really looking at repurposing the material that an organization has, videos, PDFs, whatever you want, the website itself that they do, the outreach to their customers. They're looking at all that and saying, this is content. If we're going to brand ourselves as a company, internally and externally, can we be consistent about it? So really, the folks that are creating training videos and things of that nature are starting to recognize that they are into the content management world. It goes inside, it even goes outside. From a recruiting standpoint, if I'm going to teach people how to do things here internally, can I not take that same stuff and show it outside in a posting and say, here's the life of, something, how we do things here, how we brand ourselves. It's amazing that's going on, and the vendors are adopting that because it now widens the bandwidth of what they offer. They're no longer doing a learning system; they're doing a content management system. And so that was, I think, a fairly significant thing. The same thing with the world of benefits. Benefits used to be more of administration. Once a year, we do this. Now it's a marketplace of choices, and employers are recognizing that the more benefits I can offer, whether I'm paying for them or the employee is paying, I have access to it. I'm giving things to people that makes their life better at work and away from work. And so they're starting to recognize that the benefits world has to have that kind of a marketplace approach, a very individualized, if I'm a young couple, that's one thing. If I'm towards the end of my career, maybe I'll look at completely different types of benefits. And that is an attraction and a retention device. And so these two things, so all of a sudden, and I'll say this carefully because I'm sure there's the HR folks in the audience are going to go, oh, how could he say that? HR needs to learn marketing. And I say that very truly. We're giving HR a lot of opportunity to market internally and externally in ways that we've never thought of before. And we need to understand how to leverage that very well. It becomes an excellent attraction device. It's also a terrific retention. I hear a lot of benefits people say, we've got great benefits. Nobody seems to use them. Well, that's because they probably don't know about it. There's not a constant reminder. But some of these new vendors are coming up with ways to really create a stickiness between, what they're offering and what the employee needs.
Yeah. I just did a podcast with a woman who was the chief experience officer for a healthcare system, and kind of her role evolved into that from being in marketing and then really looking to say, I want to bring this same sort of consumer experience to the employee.
Yes.
And, so basically created that role within the organization. And we talked a lot about this topic. I mean, I think HR and marketing are the perfect couple, if you will, in terms of, you've got your creative side, you've got your analytical side, you bring those two things together. It's pretty powerful. And the reality is, you want your employees to have a great experience. You want your customers to have a great experience. Why can't those two things be integrated in some way? And that, I think, is a lot of what that whole CXO is trying to achieve, right?
Exactly. And then honestly, I'll draw from a very historical perspective, but it's just kind of a mainstay. When we launched Manager Self-Service, we did ourselves and the HR a tremendous disservice. We had an HR icon sitting on the desktop that says, I have to now launch Manager Service. Instead of advertising, I'm here to help you do your work better, not HR's work, your work to better. We just said, no, here's an HR icon. Yeah, go push on that. And people were saying, I don't know what Manager Self-Service is all about, but we're just helping HR do their work. And it was just like, no. So to your point, we really need to be much more astute. The employee experience, what we called it, was more, how can we be much more efficient and get the paperwork out of HR and push it to where it needs to be at the point of order? No. The employee experience is now, to your point, we as a company offer these multiple things for you to partake in. Are you aware of them? And here's how you do it. And we make that easy. So,
and it has to be part of the journey, right? Like it has to be there when you need it. Like,
yes,
you're pushing stuff out to me and I'm busy. Like I don't have time for that right now. And I don't need to do it. It's kind of like, I mean, YouTube just totally changed the way we, do education. And now anytime you need to do anything, how do I fix my garbage disposal? I want to replace my garbage disposal. Oh, well, here's the one I bought. Let's look it up on YouTube. I'm sure it's on there. Oh, here's all the instructions. I became an expert in changing out my garbage disposal. Right. And it's that same kind of thing. Like I needed it at that moment. And I went and I found it and I got it and I was able to do what I needed to do. It's that kind of thing I think HR hasn't fully mastered yet. Because, it's like any other part of the business. You're pushing information out to people because you're ready to push it out, but not necessarily because they're ready to receive it.
Exactly. And so we're on HR's time scale or time frame as opposed to, and coupled with when I need it is the personalization. So in other words, and so I will take us to that wonderful 2-letter AI topic, just kind of moving there.
Yep.
I am seeing that the use of AI is much more along the lines of bringing me what I need when I ask for it. And so this personalization could be helped greatly by AI, not telling me what to do, but rather, I have a question. I'm going to go on leave. What does that mean? Bring me all the stuff about policies. Bring me the tools that might say, well, what am I going to get? Oh, well, here's a calculation of your paycheck. All these things. So AI is here kind of waiting in the wings to do things for us, but we haven't quite mastered it. And I hate to say it, but HR really does need to own AI as a tool. Of all the places in an organization, HR touches everybody. And so I figure if it's going to touch everybody, AI is there to help everybody. So that's kind of the paradigm. But I think the world of AI is still in its infancy. I'm seeing a couple of interesting uses of it, but not a scary use. I think people are a little bit too concerned about it taking my job. AI has tried to take my job several times on doing evaluations, but it's not working well. I'm not too worried about that. But no, I think, AI is a very popular subject. But going back to your perspective also about aha moments, the time and attendance world has suddenly vaulted to the top of the list as the productivity database in the entire company. And we've known that for those of us who've built and implemented time and attendance systems. All you have to do is say, everybody fill out a timesheet, or if you're salaried and you take a vacation, I want you to book that in there so that I know that the 40 hours was used up as vacation or a day or whatever. Outside of that, we can attach all the stuff about what it is that Nov's doing, and we have a really good understanding what the workforce is doing. And so that time and attendance thing is no longer a processing system. It is becoming an information database from. And, I'll touch upon, like I say, the world of benefits to me is just incredible, but wearables are coming into fashion very quickly. And I think we're going to see, I suspect that your system survey will touch upon the idea that who is using wearables and for what purposes and what kind of information are you getting out of them. It does touch upon that privacy world of HR as well. And we're very much aware of it. But I think that the wearables are going to give us some interesting perspective. The hybrid workforce, again, I'm going all over the place, but technology is at the base of this whole thing.
It is.
Opens up so many doors of things that we hadn't thought through, and giving us information on if we do it and capture it well and we don't intervene into the privacy world, we have some better understanding what's being done, where it's being done, and by whom. And so that's really what HR has been trying to do. Do we have the right people doing the right things at the right place? And so this technology to me is just fascinating where it's going. And I'm seeing a lot of vendors really starting to move into areas of AI and the data that we're gathering and doing some very interesting things.
Yeah.
Take a
Yeah.
look at this.
The answers are there now for HR in many of these areas if they know where to look.
Mhm.
And I think what will be the question, especially on the AI side, is how deep can I go? Right? When you start thinking about,
Yeah.
you know, how people are doing, their well-being and things like that, that some of these wearables are going to be able to help us track. Like how deep are we going to be able to go on some of this stuff, and what information do we actually want to be able to track about employees and understand, because it has an impact on our ability to be productive
Exactly.
as an organization.
Now, like I say, health and safety situations with the wearables is going to be impacted greatly. I look at so
Yeah.
many things that we can do. It all comes down to the data we capture and our ability to also cross-reference data outside of the world of HR and the workforce. What am I doing, and how does it impact the financials and the customer stuff and so on? So there's a lot of data to be had, and you're right. AI is going to be the one that's going to amass it. I always say that if you're presenting something using analysis, and you're not generating the question, you're not presenting the right data. Because
Yeah.
presenting something should raise another question. What about, or the next step? And that, I think, is exactly what AI is going to do for it. It's going to open up some thinking of, what's that next level to go down, to your point.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
very
And
cool.
I think, starting to tie in the other, the financial side of the business and supply chain. How do we really start? I think technology is bringing a lot of these things together better, so that we've got a better picture of the overall, health and management and understanding of the organization, rather than just focusing on these HR statistics, right?
Exactly. The metrics that HR could be providing, because I actually say, and I hate to say this, and I won't, the first vendor that raises their hand and changes their name will say, would they listen to this podcast? I keep calling what we're doing, we're building a workforce information asset. Just like a financial asset is a workforce information asset. All these
Yeah.
things that we're doing in processing, we've transcended from being a processing system to an asset, an information asset. And I think if we look at what we're trying to collect, it would open up the doors on a lot of things that we could be doing with that data.
Yeah.
So that's just kind of my pet peeve about things. We'll see if somebody starts calling their systems a workforce information asset.
Yeah.
So
We'll need to come up with something that it spells, a little bit better acronym, right?
I would say, like workforce information network, but that would be a win, right?
Yep. There you go. I've
Sure. Another
been
one.
there, done that one.
Exactly. So, but no, like I say, I think the technology and going back to this Technology Review Council, I'm hoping that I'm accomplishing what I sought out to do for myself. And that was to get to know what's out there, understand what are the new technologies and how are they being used, and how are people solving old problems with new ways. And that to me is considered an improvement, I think.
Yeah.
And I'm sharing that with the audience. I personally have learned so much from my audience asking the questions that really strikes upon either the concerns or the desires of that audience. And I think
Yeah.
the vendors are responding that very
Yeah.
nicely to that as well. So that's a
There's
good.
definitely some fascinating things that people are doing, and you would just never hear about it unless you're kind of looking. And I think about people in HR, and even people in maybe in, you don't have to be in HR technology to care about some of this stuff, right? And to think, I should kind of know what's happening in the market. Maybe there's some ways to help us deliver better services and solutions to our organization. Maybe there's some better and more efficient ways to do things. There's stuff out there. So staying abreast, you don't have to know everything, but kind of staying abreast of what's coming, and kind of what we do a lot of stuff on the emerging tech, and kind of where people are headed, what they're thinking, really helps, I think, to be a better leader in organizations, when you have a good pulse on what's going on.
Yeah, exactly. And like I said, I think HR folks need to know what's out there so that they can, we have a seat to the table. We've always had a seat somewhere on the table, But now that we're being asked to present at the board levels and senior management levels, we're part of the senior management team. I think being able to come and ask the questions, hey, I've seen some interesting stuff around, some data analytics packages that are doing some very cool things. What are we doing about that? And the CIO will, I don't know, talk to me about that, please. So I think coming with that kind of equipped information, I've said many, many times, you stop and think, you hear the story all the time. I went through a really great candidate experience. I got hired. I come in, and the first day they hand me the sheaf of papers or tell me to go on a terminal and do this kind of stuff. I'm going, why? So to me, your technology, how it's presented, is a reflection of the culture, who you are. And in HR, that's the one that touches everybody. So why aren't we being as up to date and, if you will, as really flexible with our technology as we should be?
Yeah.
So I think it's kind of I think it's finally a confluence of the technology and the need coming together, and HR is really quite in the middle of this process.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I think that's a great thing to leave people with, right? Is, you're in the center. Like, how are you going to participate in this new world? And I think AI is going to be something that, I don't know about you, but I want to be in front of that. Before it rolls me over. So that's something I think everybody should take some time to learn a little bit more about it.
As we came into this podcast, we were talking a little bit about our AI assistants going into the meeting. They can take faster notes and keep me honest about all the things I said I was going to do better than I will ever do on a piece of paper. And so to me, it's really augmenting my abilities, not taking me out of it. So I'll call it a positive view on AI, but I feel it's kind of where my head's going to be.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Nov, for joining the conversation today. It's been great having you. Pleasure. Where can people find out more about the Technology Review Council?
Well, I would say if you sent me an email at nov@collectivehrsolutions.com, you will get a personal answer back. The Technology Review Council is probably going to grow into a couple of different new areas. So I'm experimenting with some ideas that'll be maybe a little more in depth than just a demonstration of problems and so on. So
well, maybe we'll do something more later this year when you get
I would invite you to say, like, many of the vendors are very much into opening their system up for trials, and that's kind of
oh, that'd be awesome.
Should be fun.
Well, thank you so much. I want to thank our producers, Brand Method Media, and our marketing team. And thank you for tuning in. That's all the time we have this week for this episode of HR We Have a Problem. If you like the episode, you can subscribe to it on your favorite podcast app. And we'd love it if you'd leave us a review. We always want to know what you're thinking. If you have some ideas about topics you'd like us to talk about, and you can drop us a line or schedule a chat with us on the website. We will be back in 2 weeks with another episode of HR We Have a Problem. Thanks, everybody.